It's one of the most beautiful places in our country, a wonderful blend of wilderness and accessibility. But Squamish's Howe Sound has had a bit of a tough history, and even with its recent recovery, there are still concerns about its well-being. Hi, I'm Kristy Aleksich, and we're here for Upfront on Shaw TV. I'm joined with Tracy Saxby, welcome.
Hey.
And you're a Squamish resident, but also a marine scientist and an activist here in Squamish.
I am.
So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And how did you end up here in Squamish?
My partner and I came to Squamish in 2001 on a climbing trip, and then we started a one-year holiday working visa, and we never left.
And you're originally from Australia. And tell me a bit about your upbringing in Australia and how you got into marine science.
So when I was growing up, we lived on the east coast of Australia, right at the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. So there was a couple of times that we went camping on an island called Lady Elliot Island with my family. And I remember going snorkeling as a kid and discovering Nemo, essentially, like one of the clownfish that you find in the anemones, and just being completely mesmerized and watching all of the fish and the corals and just absolutely loving being in the water and seeing all this underwater wildlife. And that to me was, I think, really the beginning of it all. Just discovering this new world that exists under the waves, and being inspired by that.
And you went on to go to university and study marine science.
I did. Initially I didn't, because everybody says, you know, you're never going to make a living as a marine scientist, or everybody wants to work with whales, or they want to work with, you know, dolphins, and that's not necessarily a reality. But I did end up studying marine science. I have the equivalent of a master's in marine science, which is pretty cool, and I got to do a lot of research on corals, and in particular with a focus on how climate change will impact corals.
And you found your way to Canada, and you split your time between Squamish, but you used to live in Rossland as well. And when you were in Rossland, is this your first kind of foray into activism? You developed this campaign to stop plastic bags. Tell me a bit about that.
So yeah, I am definitely a bit of an accidental activist. I didn't mean to do this. What I do for my real job is I take research and data and I make it simple and I make it visual. But in 2007, I felt like I needed to do something that was locally focused, because a lot of the work I do is with universities or governments or organizations all around the world, and I wanted to make a difference in one of my hometowns. And at the time, I was really fortunate to be working remotely. We took advantage of the fact that the internet lets you work from anywhere, so we were living 8 months of the year in Squamish and then 4 months of the year in Rossland to go ski. Which is pretty incredible lifestyle. I'm very, very fortunate that I was able to make that happen by house sitting or renting or whatever. But what happened in 2007, I felt like I needed to stop sitting on a couch and complaining about the state of the world. If I wanted things to change, then I needed to be the one to change them. And I had always been passionate about plastic bags and reducing plastic bag use ever since I was a university student and I worked in a bookstore. And I used to try to trick other students into not taking plastic bags. So to me, this was something that I felt like it was really empowering, because it didn't rely on anybody else. It didn't rely on governments or other people to make decisions for you. This was a decision that every single person could make on a day-to-day basis, whether they took a plastic bag or not. So I started doing the research and pulled together all the information about why plastic bags were a problem and what we can use as alternatives. I went to the local council, I went to the local regional district, and I said, hey, I've got this crazy idea. I sent an email out to all my friends and said, I've got this crazy idea. And I got 100 emails back from people I didn't even know. I went to all of the stores in Rossland and said, hey, I've got this crazy idea, you know, Rossland could become the first plastic bag-free town in all of Canada. And I got their support. And then when I went to council and presented the idea, council chambers were packed with people that I didn't know. And the next day, it made the local news. And the day after that, I was on CBC radio, I was on the national papers, and all of a sudden, I had 50 volunteers when I had never been in an organization before. So I really dived in the deep end, and it was an amazing experience. Luckily for me, I had really good people that were helping me out, and they helped to guide me and to teach me. And in less than a year, we reduced plastic bag use by 75% in Roseland, just through an education campaign, and by creating partnerships with government and community groups and schools and the local businesses. So that was really incredible experience.
What did you learn from that experience?
Well, I repeated that experience here in Squamish when Mayor Heintzman found out that I actually lived in Squamish as well. She's just like, you know, you need to do this here. So she wrote me in. It's all Patty's fault. And I repeated the experience here, which was amazing. But I had essentially quit my job and volunteered full-time for 2 years to do this. And you can't pay the mortgage that way. So I burned out. I made a lot of mistakes and I burned out. So.
And now, moving forward, you've been settled in Squamish for some time now, and here you discovered this whole environmental issues with the Howe Sound, and it became something that you wanted to educate people more about, and you co-founded My Sea to Sky. So tell me a bit about My Sea to Sky.
So My Sea to Sky was initially started in response to our concerns about the wood fibre LNG project, and that was partly because all of us were seeing Howe Sound come back to life. In 2014, we all stood on the shores of Squamish as a pod of Pacific white-sided dolphins came in because they were being hunted by transient orcas. This was absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like this before in my life. It's like having National Geographic right here on our doorstep. So this growing awareness that Howe Sound is recovering is really important to a lot of people, because I think people are beginning to realize what we've lost. After decades of industrial destruction, essentially, Howe Sound is coming back to life. And the reason it's coming back to life is because millions of dollars of taxpayer money has been sent to clean up the industrial legacies, like from Britannia mine, from the pulp mill, the wood fibre pulp mill. So we're seeing the herring are coming back, the salmon are coming back, and the orcas and the dolphins are following them. And it's so incredible to see this recovery. So when wood fibre LNG was first proposed, it was kind of one of those instances where initially I thought it was a good idea. I have lived in Squamish since 2001. I knew that a lot of the community was hurting because a lot of people had lost their jobs when the pulp mill shut down. So my first instinct was, well, hey, this is a good thing. We're going to have an industrial project in Howe Sound that will help a lot of people. But as I started learning more and more about the project, I became really concerned about the impacts it's going to have on Howe Sound. How will it affect the recovery, the amazing recovery that we're seeing here? So I started doing research, and I started raising some of the concerns. And there were a lot of other people that were as concerned as I am. And so all of these people came together, and that's really how My Sea to Sky was formed.
It's really an amazing history with Howe Sound, because since we've lived in this area, looking back, you could see how there wasn't, porpoises and orcas in Howe Sound, and that was because of how many years of the industrial waste and all of those
decades. Like there was the Nexon chemical plant, the Howe Sound, the wood fibre pulp mill, the Britannia mine. Like they used to call Howe Sound an ecological desert. Essentially, you got after a point in Howe Sound and there was nothing. So it's really been amazing to see how resilient our environment is if we let it recover. And there's a lot of work that's been done by a lot of amazing organizations to restore the herring, to restore the estuaries, to clean up all of the toxic waste.
When did that start happening? When did they start cleaning up the Howe Sound?
I think it's been going on for a very long time. I can't give you specific dates, sorry.
That's okay. So a couple of these industrial areas, they shut down, they closed down, but then you also have environmentalists and people jumping in and helping to clean it up. Government as well.
Government. A lot of this was government-led. And just a lot of different organizations raising awareness and saying we need to clean up this mess that's been made. And it's been really inspiring to see how, if we let it, how sound will come back to life. And we want to see that continue.
When did we first start seeing more of this wildlife coming back to us in the house sound? How long has it been?
Well, even just in the amount of time that I've been here since 2001, like I remember when I first came here, going down to the waterfront wasn't really something that you did. There was really a disconnect between being in this amazing place and not really taking advantage of the fact that we also live on the ocean. So I think that mindset has changed as we've seen this recovery. And I really think it's been in the last 15, 20 years that a lot of things have changed.
And it's so amazing now that we've seen this positive change in house sound and this wonderful wildlife coming back to us and everything else. But now there's more growing concerns about some potential dangers that could be headed our way. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so with My Sea to Sky, we're not anti-industry, and I want to be very clear that this is not tourism versus industry, because tourism and development also have impacts. But what we do is we hope to inspire, educate, and organize our communities to protect house sound. And to be able to do that, we need to recognize that there are two major threats to house sound and the recovery of house sound right now. The first is wood fiber LNG, which I've talked about a little bit already. And the second is the Burnco gravel mine, which is proposed for McNab Creek. We're not opposed to gravel mines in general, but the reason that we are opposed to this particular gravel mine is because they're going to be digging up one of only 3 estuaries in house sound. We can dig up gravel anywhere, but our estuaries are sacrosanct. They're really important as wild salmon habitat, spawning habitat, and all of the other organisms and amazing wildlife that depend on them. There's not many estuaries in all of the BC coast, but they are essential. They are one of the ecosystems that are most at risk from development. So we're raising awareness about how important they are and asking people to stand up to help us to protect them.
And beyond those two kind of issues that are on your radar with My Sea to Sky, what are other environmental impacts that we could be seeing in this area?
Well, right now, house sound very much is under pressure from a lot of coastal development. Also, it's tourism. Increasing tourism is an absolute threat to house sound as well. So along with the industrial projects, we need to take into account all of the possible impacts to house sound and develop a more comprehensive management plan that looks at the big picture of all of the possible impacts to house sound and how we can manage it better and minimize our impact on the environment.
And with My Sea to Sky and perhaps other people in the area, what are people doing to help protect house sound?
Well, there's so many different things that you can do. So as I said earlier, our role is to inspire, educate, and organize people to engage. So just recently we ran a campaign to send a letter to Minister Mungal and Minister Heyman because they're about to make a decision on whether the Burnco gravel mine could go ahead or not. And so 2,800 people sent a letter to the ministers. We're about to start another public process, this time at the federal level. So we're going to be engaging people again to talk to Minister McKenna, who will be making a decision at the federal level as to whether the Burnco project should go forward or not. So we've been engaging our communities throughout with regards to wood fibre LNG or to Burnco. With wood fibre, we've been collecting signatures on the House Sound Declaration, and we have nearly 17,000 signatures now from people that live all around House Sound and around BC, across Canada, saying we want you to protect House Sound and to stop this project. So it's really quite amazing. There's a lot of information on our website under Take Action, where you can take specific actions, and we're going to keep on putting up additional actions as we identify different things that people can do.
And for you on a personal level, what is it that makes How Sound so special?
So, I mean, the fact that I came here on a 2-week climbing trip and I never left it really shows how inspiring this place is. As my partner and I were driving along the highway, it was one of those misty, rainy days. We didn't even see How Sound when we were on the highway. And then all of a sudden we were driving into Squamish and the fog lifted and there was this ray of light that came down on the chief, and it was just like this moment, you know, like your angels singing. And it was so, like, I still remember that moment in my mind. I remember that exact moment when I first saw Squamish. And it really has become my heart's home. This place is one of the most incredible places that I've ever seen, and I have traveled a lot. So I feel very strongly that we need to be stewards of where we live, and stewards of our backyard, and to stand up and say, this is where we live. We love where we live. This is why I'm taking a stand to protect this place, because it is so important for everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. Appreciate having you in today and filling me in all about this. I'm very passionate about marine life as well, being a dive master and loving where we live and this beautiful place and this beautiful How Sound that we are so fortunate to live nearby. So thank you for joining me today. And if you're interested in learning more about what you can do to protect How Sound, you can visit myseatosky.org. For Upfront and Shaw Television, I'm Kristy Aleksich.